You're listening to Indie Author Blueprint, and I'm Michelle Rayburn. Let me take you back to a moment every indie author knows all too well. The day your first proof copy arrives in the mail. You've waited for it. You track the package like a hawk, and when it finally lands on your doorstep, you can't help but grin. It's your book in print. But then after the initial excitement, you might start flipping through, and that's when reality sets in. You spot something, maybe another thing that's a little off, and another, and then you know there's some work that has to be done. Now, with the authors that I work with, I always want them to order a proof copy, and I always want them to go through it and look for things because there's always something that needs to be fixed. It's very rare that, especially on a first project with an author, that we've caught everything in the process. And so there's some fixing when we see it in print. We notice things that we don't always notice on the digital screen. But there are many people who want to take shortcuts, and I have done it myself. It actually happened with my first book. I didn't order a proof copy. I actually think it wasn't available. I could only do digital galleys. I couldn't get a physical proof or anything like that. And so there were some parts that I caught on the digital proofs, and I had friends look them over and they caught some things too. But there were also some things that happened that were too late to fix because once the book's typeset, certain changes change the entire layout and can get very costly. They need to be fixed in that first stage. And there were some things that I learned that now when I'm working with clients, I do differently. So I remember proofing the digital version and seeing there were running headers on some pages that shouldn't have been there. And there were some that were wrong, like the wrong chapter title was there. There were blank pages that had headers and page numbers printed on them, and they were actually supposed to be completely blank. And then there was this font issue. The typesetter I hired did a wonderful job, very creative designer. But I kept saying, I think the font should be a little bit bigger. And the designer said, if you go with a bigger font, it'll just look garish. And I was like, okay, I will trust. I knew this designer was fairly new to book design, but was very talented in other areas. However, when I got that first box of books that were retail copies ready to go, sat down with a cup of coffee, ready for the big reveal, and within a few minutes, I had some remorse. The margins were tighter than I wanted, and so I feel like there wasn't enough white space on the page. The font did feel small, and over the years, I've had people tell me the font is small. And then the gutter, the inside space where the pages meet the spine, wasn't as wide as it should be. It was okay because it was not the thickest of books, but you never want to have words going into the crack there. You want lots of space. So, in other words, my finished book wasn't really finished at all, but there was nothing I could do about it. And I've just lived with it all these years, and it's been a good lesson. And really, it didn't affect the readability that much. It's not terrible. It's just that I should have gone with the gut instinct and seen a physical proof. And then beyond that, I should have done something to stand up for what I really wanted. Because I was indie publishing that, but I had hired somebody to do the work. I did re-release it later and I used basically the same interior, only changing the copyright because I didn't really want to retypeset the whole thing. I wanted to use the cover as it was. So that life lesson has led me to what we're talking about today, where I tell you, you really need to order a proof copy. Whether you're publishing with KDP or Ingram Spark or both or anywhere else, you really need to get a proof copy. And we're looking for more than just the typos because there are people who think I could just print this out on my home printer and then I'll just go through it there. That is true that if you print it out, you're probably going to find some of the typos you would miss on the screen, but it isn't just about typos. So let's talk about why proof copies matter. When you're deep in the indie publishing process, it's tempting to skip ordering a printed proof. You've seen your PDF, you've had your digital previewers, maybe you've even gone through the ebook on the Kindle and everything looks fine, right? But here's the thing, your digital proof can't replicate what happens when the ink hits the paper. So the margins it's hard to visualize when you see it on the screen exactly how that's going to look on a printed page. The line breaks that you see may not be so obvious on the screen. And then when you see it in print, you realize that broke in a really weird place. The color doesn't always look the same. So if, even in grayscale, a gray box behind some text can look too light, too dark. All of the little inconsistencies that your eyes glide past on a screen can suddenly jump out at you when you see it in print. So, ordering a proof copy is your chance to experience your book exactly as your readers will experience it. So, it's really about protecting your reputation as a professional publisher. It's kind of your dress rehearsal before opening night. And you really wouldn't perform a concert or a play or anything like that without a sound check. So, holding the book in your hands physically is like doing that sound check. So, when I flipped through that proof copy and I realized how cramped my margins were, I realized that it wasn't quite the right fit in print. Now, like I said, I've kept it as is because I should have made some of those decisions sooner. We fixed the errors, but I really couldn't fix the layout part of it. And that was something that was important to see in print. It's also important to feel the paper because you'll find out if you publish on both KDP and Ingram Spark that the paper weight and the smoothness isn't even the same. The books that I've done on Ingram Spark are a lot floppier because they have two weights of paper you can choose, and if you choose the lighter one, the book is really bendy, and it's a heavier paper on KDP. Also means the spine size is a little different, so I want to check that. Now, going beyond typos, what do you actually check then when you get your book? You get the proof. Some people think I just glance at it, I'm good. I usually recommend to authors that you read through the whole thing again because you still want to proofread it one more time. But this is also the time where you need to put on your publisher hat. We're not thinking the editor hat right now. We are actually looking beyond the words. So let's think about things like page layout and spacing. Look at the margins. See if the text feels cramped. See if the margin needs to have more space in the center where the gutter is. Now, this is something if you're hiring somebody who knows what they're doing with books. Hopefully they've thought that out. Hopefully they've taken your page count into account and made that gutter wider if you have a really thick book and there's a lot of paper and it can't lay flat the same. But that's something you should be checking on a proof that you get of the PDF. So what I recommend long before you do the printed proof of the book, if your designer sends you a sample chapter, a PDF of how the book's going to look, I download that to my computer. I print it at home. It's just one chapter. And I do this when I'm designing too so that I can see. But when you're printing, make sure it's at 100%, not enlarged, not fit the page, 100%. That way, whatever spits out of the printer is the same size it's going to look, even though it's not trimmed up and it doesn't look quite right. The printing is going to be the size that it is on the page in the printed book when you print it at 100%. I do that because I want to see, what does this font look like? What does the spacing between lines of text look like? All of that. So that's something you can check. I always put crop marks on it so I can trim the page down. I can just see how it's going to look. Outside of that, when I get the book in print and I'm proofing a real copy, that's when I'm looking for anything that kind of had a mistake. For example, a paragraph indentation was missed, the drop cap on the first part of the title was missed, font formats where an epigraph at the beginning of a chapter, oops, they're all supposed to be in italics and that one wasn't. So it's the formatting, the actual formatting. And then there's these things that some people call widows and orphans. We're looking for single lines that are stranded at the top or bottom of pages. Something I've noticed is that for me as a typesetter, it's sometimes really hard for me to get the pages to look right if I'm trying to avoid having those single lines stranded at the top or bottom of pages. And I've noticed that more and more typesetters are leaving the one at the bottom of the page. So what that means is like a paragraph starting and the rest of the paragraph continuing on the next page. But the thing that I always try to fix, and I've noticed some are also not fixing that because they're getting really fast, I think, with their automated processes of typesetting, is when there's a single line at the top of a page, just all by itself, the end of a paragraph, just sitting there, a couple words. That looks really weird. So, with some changing of spacing, and I have to manually do this on each page to make sure they all look the same, is I sometimes have to adjust things a little bit to bump a little more text up to the top so it's not just one line by itself. The other thing is looking for what people call runts. Some people also call these widows or orphans too. I don't remember. I don't know. I don't always use that terminology, but the runts terminology people use, it's a single little word by itself, long paragraph, the next line, the very end, one little teeny word by itself. If it's a long word, it's not a big deal, but if the word is like um two, or if the word is a book or something with only a few letters, 4 letters or something, it looks strange. So I also then will adjust the spacing between letters to bump a few, like a word or two onto that line. When you're proofing, like the one that hit me personally when I saw it on the digital version, you want to look at running headers, and that's what's at the top of the left and the right, or sometimes it's at the bottom. It might be a running footer. It's the book title and the chapter titles, or in fiction, it's the book title and your author name. In fiction, there isn't much to check because it should be the same for the entire book and shouldn't have chapter names and that kind of thing because usually your chapters are numbered. But in nonfiction, every chapter might have the book title on the left, and on the right, it's the chapter title in that running header. So you want to make sure it matches. I've had a few where I got through the typesetting process when I'm making one for somebody else, and it just says running header because that's my placeholder or chapter title. And so I have to go through and find those ones that I missed and fix those. And you would be surprised at how easy it is for either section breaks to shift just enough that those elements don't go where they belong, or where a lot of times the typesetter has to manually apply some kind of format. It's just much more work sometimes to try to automate it. And so in manually doing it, they might have missed something. So you just need to check every one of those and flip through and make sure that they're accurate. You want to make sure that what you read on the page is readable, that it's comfortable. You want to make sure that the chapter titles and subheadings all have the bold formatting or whatever you put on them. It needs to have all of that consistent. And so there are times paging through 20 chapters, I might find one chapter where, oops, I forgot to apply the title formatting correctly to that chapter. So we're always going page by page and pausing and going running header, subheading fonts, title font, whatever. And I'm pausing on each page as I flip through to just check. I also am looking when I'm proofreading a final copy is to see, are there any places where a whole bunch of automatic hyphenation happened? Now, I generally set up InDesign so it doesn't have 2 hyphens in a row, but there are some words that are hyphenated in the text. It's not automatic hyphenation. And so it might be that a hyphenated word got hyphenated in the typesetting process, which looks kind of weird because it's a hyphenated adjective or something like that, where it's a long word and the end of the second word got another hyphen. So I'm always looking for that too. I'm looking for any words that stack up on top of each other. I'm looking for the same words over and over in a paragraph that end up right on top of each other. I try to adjust things a little bit to fix those when I'm doing the typesetting. Now, we want to talk about the outside of the book. When you're looking at the cover, you want to know if the spine text is centered and readable. Just know that on KDP, some of the proofs it's not centered. In fact, when I order books, if I order 30 books, it might not be centered on all of them. So it's just a production thing with print on demand. They're not always perfect. So we get the best we can. We look for any white lines or edges where the cover didn't go off the edge and bleed like it was supposed to, just to make sure there's nothing to fix there. That happens occasionally when something was uploaded in the wrong dimensions. It can happen. You want to look at the color and see if it's what you expected. Be aware that colors will print differently on matte paper or gloss paper. The richness, the darkness, the saturation is different. I've noticed that on mine, they don't print the same every time I get a new order of a batch of books. In fact, even within the order, they might differ. So just be aware that we're not looking for this perfect shade of a color. When we're printing on demand, we get what we get sometimes. But if it's quite a bit darker, like things look really murky, there are some corrections that can be made. I've had clients give me photos, drawings, different things they've done where they've done them in an RGB color space. They really need to be 4-color CMYK. And so when you change that in Photoshop, it sometimes loses some of the richness. It can come out looking darker. So I need to manually adjust some things to lighten it up, brighten it up, whatever has to be done to make it look good in the print format. So when you order, you're getting one from wherever you're getting it, KDP, Ingram Spark, both. You're getting that print proof to at least see how you want it to be close to what you're looking for. Another thing that you're looking for is the physical feel. I remember getting my book and loving that feel of the matte finish. Now, the matte finish is different in different platforms as well. I love the KDP matte finish because it has kind of a velvety feel, and people pick up the book and they react. They really do. At a book table when I'm speaking, they pick it up and they comment on the feel of that velvety cover. And I know that the matte paper that I've gotten from Ingram Spark is not always the same sometimes, but generally it's a little different. It's printed by Lightning Source, and I've covered this in episodes before where I've talked about how different printers have some different specs, and KDPs are not the same as what Ingram Spark / Lightning Source uses. The main thing is to look at how it feels when you're holding it. Is the cover, does it just all feel like it fits my brand? The way it feels in my hands feels good. Does it feel like it should be gloss, or should I switch to matte? If you still can. Sometimes you can't change up. So anyway, those are the physical things that we're looking for. Now, there are some typical fixes then that you might have to go back and fix, especially if you did this yourself. You might realize that the margins are too tight. You need to fix those. Don't go with just the minimum of what KDP says. They definitely need to be almost double what that minimum is in order for your book not to feel like you were cramming as many words on the page as you could to try to save page count or something like that. You want to look for any surprises, anything that you hadn't thought about, and now you see it in print and you think, I should have fixed that. Now's the time. The goal here is not to just keep on adjusting until it's perfect, because sometimes that gets in the way, especially if you're a perfectionist, but to know that now is the time to fix the things that really need to be fixed. So rather than nitpicking every little thing, definitely fix those things that are important. And then if there are some things where you're trying to tweak every little line, that's just not possible to do. So it depends on how much money you want to spend having somebody make changes for you if you've hired somebody. When I mentor authors, I sometimes see them, like I said, resisting ordering the proofs because they're in a hurry to get it published. And I know after months of writing and revising, you're ready to hit publish and celebrate and move on. But I encourage you not to skip that proof copy. There are some things you really should do that will save you not only in money, but your reputation later. Holding that imperfect proof for myself reminded me that publishing is still craftsmanship. It's not just about the story, it's about presentation. So as indie authors, we're not just writers, we are the entire publishing department. Think of your proof then as a moment to pause and reflect and make your book the best it can be before it meets the world. Now, I want to tell you about a bonus that I'm going to offer for paid subscribers. It will come out a little bit later after this episode of the podcast and the article drops, but I'll send you a quick checklist that you can use when you're going through your proof. You can print it out and use it as a way of reminding yourself all the things you should be looking at when you're doing a proof. So I will send that out to paid subscribers in a separate email. I want to thank you then for being here today. Thank you for listening to all the episodes that you have. If this is your first one and you found me randomly on a podcast app, You maybe don't know that this actually exists on Substack. So you'll find Indie Author Blueprint and a lot of the tutorials that I offer on Substack and all of the other podcast episodes as well. I put out a lot of stuff that doesn't require a subscription, but I do have that next level subscription because it's there for people who are looking for the coaching kind of help. The kind of thing I don't have time to do one-on-one with every single person, but I can offer it behind a paywall so that you can get that next level when you're really working on professionally publishing your book. Remember that your proof copy isn't a sign of imperfection, it's a sign of professionalism. So every time you find a small issue and fix it, you strengthen your publishing muscles. And when you finally open that finished copy, you're going to be so much happier when you get that box of books and your book is ready to meet the world and you open the box. Hopefully, you set up your video camera and you're doing the big reveal that you're going to put out there. So remember, that's all part of the process. Okay, until next time, keep on writing, keep on refining the process, keep on having a purpose to what you're doing, because in the end, you're going to be so much happier than if it's all just randomly done. All right, till next time, have a great day.